Mm. Okay, Razin, can you see the slides?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you very much. Just to notify everyone, recording has been started. Welcome everyone. So this is again the Energy Sphere from UNITEN, welcoming you to a new episode of the series called Copy Hours series. So your host is again Ahmed Mubarak. This is my name. I am a senior lecturer here in UNITEN, and I work in this Planet IoT lab within the Energy Sphere. And to those who are new with us, the Energy Sphere is an office space, one business unit under the University Nigel National, UNITEN. It is like a hub of R&D, providing executive training, a lot of facilities, a lot of services. So it includes a lot of labs and rooms, meeting rooms and workshop rooms. So I work in one of those labs called the IoT Planet Lab. And this Energy Sphere is organizing some series of talks and seminars and workshops, especially in this 2022. We have two regular series and we have some intermittent training sessions. So for the regular series, we have this coffee hour series. This is the fifth session in this year. So we have talked about general topics, not very technical topics, of general interest to especially postgrad students and young researchers. And sometimes it's broader than that. So for today, we will talk a little bit about, we will focus on postgrad students. We will talk about postgrad studies, and we will provide some survival and thriving actually tips also for the students specifically for the main focus. But of course, everybody knows, including myself, including anybody who just crossed that border, that still you will need these tips for many, many years to come, even after graduation. So I hope this will make sense for most of you. And let's just start again. There are many tips here, so I will go over some in a quick pace. Some of them I will focus a little bit more if they are extremely important, actually, in my opinion. So you can disagree, but hopefully at the end you will feel that you had come up with something valuable after this a little bit less than 1 hour we will spend together. So first, the agenda that we will divide our talk to some basic aspects of the postgrad life. And we will talk first about the very, very few but basic fundamentals. And then we move into the skills that any postgrad student needs to survive and to thrive in the study. And then we'll talk a little bit about things related to supervision, especially your supervisor, and then your topic of research, then the daily process you will go through during your studies, and then the importance of people in the research and in postgrad studies. And finally, don't forget to take rest, and we'll just talk about the rest of things, especially about taking enough rest just to survive through this journey. If we have some time at the end, we will be glad to receive some comments and some feedback from you, or some question and answer. So for the fundamentals, let's start on the fundamentals. So I will just, sometimes I will skip over some of the points if they are very, very obvious, but I have just preferred to write them down so that later on when you receive the slides, you can refer to these on your own. But let's agree on the fundamentals. So first of all, now you are embarking on a new actually stage of your life. This is, unfortunately, it is by design, but this design is not very well documented. By design, this stage of the study, which is the postgrad study, the things that is under beyond the undergraduation, beyond the undergraduate studies, beyond your first degree, bachelor degree, these are totally different from all the stages that is below this level. So you have gone through probably primary school, secondary school, and then the first degree in university. All those have something in common, but now you are coming to a stage which is totally different actually. So instead of spending few months or few years figuring out what's the difference, you should really know the system before you start. If you have already started, most probably, you should be aware of this because the earlier you are aware of this, the better you will go through this stage. So one of the basic things you have to do in whatever year you are now, whether you are a master or PhD student. Many of my tips apply to PhD more than the master, especially the master by research. They share with the PhD level a lot of things. There are a lot of things common to those two levels of study. But even master students of what we call structure C or B, what some people call mixed mode or coursework mode, also they will make you'll find that a lot of these tips make sense as well. So first you have to learn the system. This is number one. You have to know what is postgrad study, how it differs from the undergrad. How do you know that? There are a lot of resources. If your university provides the guidelines or some document, probably you have to read that. If not, I really suggest that you read the book about that. Really, that's not like a overkilling advice. It's really a necessity. So actually, I'm just presenting here the cover of just one example of a book written about PhD. This is called The Unwritten Rules of PhD Research. There are plenty of books about that. Really plenty of books. So you can just Google how to get PhD or advice about PhD, then just specify the books category, and you will find a lot of books. This book just happened that I read this book more than 10 years ago, and I liked it. So I just remember it when I was preparing for this book. So one of the main aspects of PhD and master studies that you have to know clearly that postgrad is not undergrad part 2. That's very important. Many students come, especially those who are coming from the undergrad studies, they just assume that they will continue with the study. There is no continuum. It's not continuous scale. Actually, there is an abrupt cut somewhere, and then you have to adjust yourself for totally different level of study. So, for example, one of the main differences between postgrad and undergrad studies, first of all, you don't have a structure, you don't have syllabus, and of course, you don't have a timetable. These are very important points. Because of that, this is more like the independent responsibility. So you will be responsible for your life, for your time, for the structure of your studies, when and what to study mostly. Mostly you will be, especially if you are doing masters by research or you are doing PhD. Most probably there will be no syllabus. So what is the syllabus? You have all the literature open to you. What is the structure? You have all the options to structure your life and your study and everything, every stage of your study and your life actually. There is no timetable, so if you waste something, nobody will remind you, nobody will organize, nobody will structure the time for you. That's very important, because if you are not aware of that, you will just wait. Most of the students, they just wait for somebody to just specify, to determine to them what's the next step, what's to do now, what's to do tomorrow, what's to do after tomorrow. That won't happen in postgrad studies. And the type of knowledge and level of mastery is totally different. That's also quite important. Type of knowledge in undergrad studies, what type of knowledge you have? Well-established knowledge. Between parentheses, the old knowledge, existing established knowledge. And you have just to show that you can absorb that knowledge, and then later on maybe you can apply that knowledge somewhere. That's not the case in postgrad studies. Most of the time when you join a postgrad level of study, you have to work with state-of-the-art knowledge, cutting-edge knowledge, knowledge that has been not proven yet, actually knowledge that are waiting for you to push the border and to add somewhere. So that's totally different from the type of knowledge in undergrad. And also the level of mastery. Of course, the level of mastery will differ significantly. At the undergrad level, nobody assumes that you can master all the basics and fundamentals of the sciences that are thrown to you. There are many disciplines probably you will study, actually sub-disciplines you will study under some field, under some area. Actually, sometimes what you take in undergrad studies is a quite broad range of subjects that belong to some area somehow, and that's usually broad. You take the fundamentals, and it's very difficult actually to master those fundamentals in 4 years, for example. But after that, everybody assumes that you will have your time to master something, subset of these subjects later on. This later on is the postgrad studies. So the level of mastery will be totally different. You are not just supposed to recite or to just remember some facts about your subject. Now you are assumed that everybody will assume that you are mastering the skills and you can apply them and you can actually discuss the ideas and probably add to them, criticize them, debate about them, and maybe probably add to them at some point. So that's the level of mastery. You can see master's level and PhD level. That's the level of mastery we are talking about. If you remember this, probably you can survive. If you don't know about this, you will suffer for a long time before somebody make you aware of this fact. Grades and types of assessments. There are a lot of grades in undergrad. If you miss something here, you can recover or you can catch up or you can compensate somewhere else. And there are so many types of assessments all over the years. So you can miss a quiz or you can miss a test and you can then take another test. And there are many final exams, many subjects, many years. Here, most probably you won't have any type of assessment except maybe once in a year, and probably the final exam, which is the viva at the end of your study, pass or fail. No recovery of that. So you cannot also measure. You cannot also be aware of your assessment will be informal from your supervisor, and probably during the defense, maybe once in a while, probably once in a year, or sometimes once in 2 years, and at the end when your papers are examined or when your thesis is examined. So that's quite different. So you have to be aware of that. So you have to learn how to assess yourself. And of course, one of the most important points here, which is the scope of competition. This is very, very, very important because once you know about this, once you just put this into your awareness, much things will differ. Actually, many things will differ. So you will now move into a new stage and a new set of mind. Okay, and your mindset will change drastically, and that will serve you very well. Just keep this in your mind. When you were in undergrad school, you were competing with some local group, few students, maybe in your class or in your batch, and that was very, very local scope of competition. Now, what you are or who you are competing with is actually the whole world. Okay, it's not only your country, it's not your region, it's the whole world. Everybody interested in the same field you are interested in. So that scope of competition brings in new challenges, of course. So if you didn't put that in your consciousness from the start, you won't do very well in postgrad studies. Maybe it is scary a little bit when I put it like that, but that's really a key point. If you remember that's excellent. So another tip is you have to learn the lingo, learn the language, the terminology. So just to make it short, I will just give a few examples. So maybe at the beginning you have to know something. While you walk along the way, you have to pick up the language of the postgrad studies and of your field. There will be specialized lingo for every field. And there is also in academia specialized lingo that only academicians use. You have to learn that. For example, you have to know what's a conference, what's a journal, what's an article, what's a symposium, what's a validation, what's an evaluation, what's the difference between them. You have to learn the lingo of the studies, what's the quantitative, what's the qualitative. You have to pick that lingo, and sometimes there are terminology specific to your field. So whatever field you are, you have to speak the language of the people in that field. That's very important. If you miss that, probably you can't survive or you will be suffering during your study. Another tip is that these are all fundamental tips, by the way. It's not very focused, it's general, but it's very important. And then you have to belong to the field. That's also quite important, and I don't see many people talk about that, surprisingly. So you have to belong to the field. You have a field, you have chosen a field. When you join a postgrad degree, whether it is a master, especially if it is a master by research or a mixed mode, or of course, if you are taking a PhD, you are now having kind of a membership. Earn that membership, and you have to qualify to be part of that community, and you have to belong to the field. You have to think like that. You cannot just think that I am an outsider that will take a certificate and will walk away. No, that's not the case. You are part of the field, so you have to belong to the field. What does it mean to belong to the field? First, you have to know your field. Whatever field you are in PhD, you will find that your field is very, very specific. In master, it will be a little bit broader. But whatever it is, it will be some kind of sub area under some discipline. It could be engineering, but that's very general area. It could be electrical engineering, that's very general. What kind of electrical engineering? It could be electronics, it could be power, it could be, for example, renewable energy, even renewable energy field, for example. It could be solars, it could be wind, it could be, there is a field under all of these. There is a subfield and a subfield, and there is a community for each of them, and there are like something like a membership. You have to earn it. You have to earn it, and you have to feel like you are part of this. You defend this field against the strangers, and you add to this field, and you consolidate the knowledge of this field, and you actually contribute to the field. And you have to earn this. You have to know the field. You have to know the field. So one of the aspects of knowing the field, that at least you know the fundamentals. So that's the most important advice here. If you are new, or even if you are not new, you have to know always the fundamentals of your field. I cannot imagine that, for example, I can say I'm doing a PhD, for example, in one part of, computer science, probably, let's assume cybersecurity, okay? And of course, I will not be able to add something to the whole field of cybersecurity. I have to choose a subfield of that. But I cannot say I belong to that if I don't know the basics, the fundamentals. If I don't know what is basic networking, what's the TCP/IP, if I don't know at least one programming language, how operating systems work, all these fundamentals, I cannot belong to this field. Same like electronics, electrical engineers. If I don't know the basic circuit theories, if I don't know the basic equations, the basic models, the basic theories in my field, if I didn't spend some time, because there is an assumption here, there's an assumption that I have spent few years of my life already in this field, especially in the undergrad level. So I cannot belong to that field. If this didn't happen before, you have to earn this membership and you have to study the fundamentals. So leave everything else first and focus on the fundamentals as if you are studying this in the undergrad school. Then you can have the membership of the postgrad level. Okay, these are the fundamentals. Let's move into the some other parts of the survival tips. The skills. Most probably, let me say this. Probably, in my opinion, this slide, although there are few slides in this talk, I think that this is one of the most important slides of the whole talk. This slide, the skills. Because if you agree on the fundamentals, okay, we agree that you have to learn the system and you have to earn your membership to the field, and also you have to pick up the terminology and language of your field. Now you are left with the skills. Without these skills, whatever you have done in the fundamentals, you will not survive. So these are the skills, is the vehicle that you will move you along the journey. If you don't have these skills, you cannot move along this journey. These are very important to remember. If we agree that doing research means adding, or contributing means addition. Contribute equals add. So contributing or adding to the body of knowledge in your field, you cannot do that. If this is research, how can you do that without these skills? These are the vehicles that will enable you to do that, to add to the body of knowledge. First, learn to read. Okay, this might be surprising. Whenever I discuss this with some of the friends, some of the colleagues, some of the students, they're surprised, because learn to read, everybody assumes that we can read. But actually, I can argue that very few people can read, really. So reading here is not knowing the alphabet. It's not about knowing the alphabet and being able to decode the words and being able to, for example, recite a piece of writing. No, reading means a very high level, sophisticated skill. We mean it's the ability to really read sophisticated pieces of knowledge and be able to go along with that. It's very, very high level skills. It's not easy to pick up. I am not referring to the reading skill you have picked up in your early days when you were 5 years old or 6 years old or 10 years old. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the skill that will enable you to pick up a book or a paper and you sit down and fight the boredom and be able and have the enough patience to just sit with that piece of work until you finish it. I am talking about the skill that enable you to fill the gap, bridge the gap between you and the writer. There is always a gap. The writer has written this piece of work in different setup, different environment, with different background, different time probably, and you are sitting here with different mood and different background and different setup. Everything is different. How to bridge the gap between you? This needs practice. This is very sophisticated skill. So that kind of skill comes with practice. So you have to learn that skill. If you don't know that skill, it's very, very difficult. It's almost impossible to survive in postgrad studies. It's very important. It's the most important skill is reading. You know, reading is too much associated with research, too much that even in some countries until today, historically and until today, there is a position actually in a research position called a reader. A reader. So a reader is like a researcher. You cannot assume that I am a researcher without being a very, very good reader. That's the most important one. Then learn to write, of course. Although your career is not actually that one of a writer or like a novelist or journalist, but the writing is part of your career. So as a researcher, after being able to read, you have to be able to write. That's actually, I will not spend a lot of time here. We had a whole talk about writing tips before. That was the second session in this series. But really, every single tip of these 4 to 9 listed here in this slide, they deserve a complete series of talks by themselves, really. So I will just hint toward that. That's very important. Just keep that in your mind. You have to learn to read. You have to learn to write. You have to learn to think. That's the most surprising thing when I discuss with my students or the colleagues. What is this learn to think? Actually, surprisingly, very, very few people spend enough time thinking. And thinking is a very crucial skill for postgrad studies, for research in general. It's very, very crucial. Just to make it short and direct, thinking is that you spend some time to reflect on whatever you have read or whatever you want to write or whatever you have heard about or whatever you want to produce. You reflect about that. You reflect on that. So you have to have time. I will ask you this question, just to skip this point and move on. How much time in your day, probably, or in your week, you spend walking around a room or walking around a lake or, for example, walking along a road? How much time you spend walking just for the sake of thinking, not because you want to move from point A to point B? Most of the researchers, the good researchers, and by extension, the good PhD and master students, they spend significant amount of their time not only reading or writing or experimenting or learning something new, but thinking, just thinking. Probably walking around the room is most common thing, or sitting in the chair, just doing nothing other than thinking, reflecting on this. You have to spend enough time doing that. Otherwise, you will not be a good postgrad student. And of course, learn to communicate. Communication is not only in written format, but also verbally communicate. You have to learn how to deliver your ideas, because that's the most important way you can convince everybody. You can first inject your ideas in the minds of other people, and you can convince everybody of the significance and importance of what you are doing. And first, you make them understand. Without that, you cannot even pass your Viva. They learn to organize, to be organized. Without being organized, probably you will spend a lot of time doing very, very, very less amount of work. And that's, of course, this we have spent a whole talk again about productivity and being organized. And for this, for the writing and for the productivity, I will refer you to the previous sessions. You can find the previous sessions in YouTube of the Energy Sphere YouTube channel, or of course, you have the whole internet, you have the whole Google. Just Google around and you will find a lot of tips about this. And learn your tools. These tools could be the tools for the reading or the writing or the thinking or the communication, or the tools you need to work in your field, means technical tools. Just to make clear what I mean by this number 9. This is about craftsmanship. So you have to deal, this is a very, very good suggestion and very important one. please deal with your study in your field as being a kind of craftsmanship. So you are a craftsman or craftswoman for that sake. So you have to learn. You have to learn the trade, the tools of the trade. Uh, every trade has its own tools. Every field has its own tools. And what makes a good craftsman or craftswoman is how well, of course, after knowing the fundamentals, knowing all the basic theories, how good or how well they are using their tools and how good their tools are. So you have to learn the tools, of course, because this differs significantly and too much between different fields. I will skip this point for now. So just keep it for your reflection later on. Now let's move on for the skills. I actually borrow 3 points from this article here. You can find the link to the article at the bottom of the page. This is in the Nature. This was a small piece of article. Yeah, it's quite old, published in Nature. So I just borrow 3. There are quite a lot of advice for postgrad students, especially PhD students. But I just borrow these 3. So first, be creative. So this is very important. So this relates, by the way, to the thinking. You have to think quite a lot. And when you are creative, this comes out of the thinking. After you read, you reflect on what you read, what you hear, and you reflect on what you want to do next. So, and you have to come up with creativity, means creative ideas, new ways to do things. So you have to think about what you are doing and why you are doing it. Look for better ways to go, better ways to organize yourself, better ways to do your work, and better ways to improve your field. That's a contribution that you can come up with. Don't see your PhD as just a roadmap laid out by your supervisor, and you have to develop good writing skills. Again, we have said that before, but I emphasize this again. They will make your scientific career immeasurably easier. And finally, he said, the author of this article, to be successful, you must be at least 4 of the following. So you have to be either smart, or motivated, or creative, or hardworking, skillful, and lucky. Of course, he said at least 4 of them. So it is an and between some of them rather than or. So, and of course, this is lucky at the end. You can't depend on luck, so you had better focus on the others. So these are basic traits of a PhD student, of a good postgrad student. Being smart, sometimes it's helpful, but it's not very, very, very crucial, because many smart people didn't do very well in postgrad studies. If you are less smart than others, I am talking about the natural intelligence, but you have all these skills that we talk about, then you can outperform other smarter people in that sense. You have to be a little bit motivated. If not, this will be very difficult to move on. One way of being motivated is that we will talk about this in the next slide. You have to select a topic that you can live with for few years actually, and be creative. This is about thinking, and you have to be hardworking. There is no escape of this. Hardworking is a must, whatever you are doing actually in life. So postgrad is one of those. And skillful, again, I repeat, I really highly value this. Skillful, this is craftsmanship. If you are not skillful, better go and look for another way of living that doesn't need skills, and you won't find a lot of them. Then we move into tips for dealing with supervisor. I will make this very short because I think it could be obvious and many of you can relate with that. So, and again, I'm aware that a lot of these tips could be expanded upon, and could actually, they deserve their whole sometimes a talk or a series of talks. But for the sake of brevity, let's say that first, for the supervisor, first of all, it's highly recommended that you choose a supervisor. Of course, whenever you have the choice and whenever you have the option, you have to choose a supervisor whose work you admire and who is resourceful. Okay, there is 2 points here, by the way. The first point is crucially important. The second point is not that much important, although it's very helpful. The supervisor, first, you should like the work of the supervisor, because you will work under the guidance of the supervisor, and you will refer mainly to the background and works of the supervisor. So the works of the supervisor represent the kind of supervision you will receive. It represents the focus you will be advised to follow, and it represents a lot of things. So you have like kind of prediction. You have a kind of you can estimate, and you can have a kind of taste and a kind of an idea about what type of supervision, what type of um, focus you will be following by following the previous work of the supervisor. So if you like the work of the supervisor, it's okay. You can follow the supervisor to the end. If you don't like the or you don't know about the work of the supervisor, it's very risky, and a lot of problems can sneak in. And also, again, it will be very helpful to have a supervisor who is resourceful. Resourceful means, for example, they have a lot of grants. For example, they have money to support you. They have some positions in the institute that can help you in overcoming some of the problems. That's very helpful, although it's not very necessary, not very crucial, but most of the time it's much helpful. It's very rare that you can find all of these traits in a single supervisor, but just keep that in mind. So then, of course, you have to listen to your supervisor, and you have to speak to your supervisor. These are two different things. So when your supervisor speaks, you have to listen. It's very important. You agree or disagree, this is another point. Okay, you have to listen. Later on, if you disagree, we will okay, you can work on that later on. But first, you have to listen. Most of the time, even if you disagree with the supervisor, it depends, of course, on the supervisor, especially if you have selected the supervisor carefully. Means I suggest that most of the time you listen to your supervisor and you follow the advice of the supervisor most of the time, because you cannot know the same as your supervisor, who is before you in this field and in this experience, probably for maybe a decade or more sometimes. So, but be careful. It's not. I am not saying follow always the advice of the supervisor. I'm saying listen to your supervisor. You have to seriously take the advice of the supervisor seriously. If your supervisor didn't speak, you have to speak. So you have to remind your supervisor of your existence, and you have to be able to share with the supervisor your concerns and your problems, if you have any problems. And of course, you have to have meetings with supervisors regularly. Otherwise, that won't be very productive. And we all know that. So I won't really elaborate on this point, because if you didn't set up a regular schedule, kind of regular, this regularity, this is different. It could be, of course, for some it could be once a semester, for some it could be once a month, for some very rarely it could be once a week. It depends on but there should be kind of meetings with your supervisor, whatever, especially in the case of PhD. If in the PhD you just assume that you will take spontaneous meet up with your supervisor without a schedule, then believe me, it's very easy to just close your eye. 1 year, 2 years, sometimes 3 years will pass, and you have done nothing. So that's very, very common. So take the initiative, and if your supervisor is not imposing some kind of schedule, this regularity, again, it differs from supervisor to supervisors, but at least it should be once in a semester. This is the minimum, especially for PhD. Then you have to initiate, and you have to be initiative, and you have to be proactive, and you have to suggest some kind of a schedule for meeting up with your supervisor. And whenever you meet up, that's very important. Most of us, including myself, other students, most of us ignore this. You have to have an agenda, because meeting with a supervisor is not very easy most of the time. Of course, everybody experiences that. I know that, you know that, because your supervisor most probably very busy. And then when you meet with the supervisor, sometimes it's very easy to just lose the sense of the time, and you just discuss sub-important things, and you are short of time, then you are out of time, then we have not utilized this time of the meeting in the best way. So a very good productive technique and tip is to always have an agenda. So you always have an agenda for every meeting, and most probably If you are good, you will also document this results of the action points you are taking after each meeting, so that you have something to work on until the next meeting. And of course, this is just to make it clear that because supervisors are busy, sometimes supervisors need some time. Although I urge you to be proactive and to be initiative, but of course you have to allow your supervisor enough time to respond to your requests. Sometimes, yeah, life goes in the way, and supervisors need some time. Of course, these tips are not very clear because they need elaboration, really, I have to admit. But just maybe you can keep the most important, the high-level ideas behind them. Is that select your supervisor wisely based on the previous work of the supervisor, and whether the supervisor is resourceful or not. And then you have to initiate, you have to build the relationship, and you have to be responsible for this. Means you have to listen, and you have to speak to supervisor, and you have to really organize and manage the meetings with the supervisor. That's the most important points here. But I agree that talking about the relationship with the supervisor needs more talks. But for the sake of brevity, again, we move on. And now let's talk a little bit about the topic. Let's talk about the topic of the research. So first, the best tip here is to choose a topic that you can live with for at least a few years. Please remember that. Don't be very careless when you take the topic. So many of the students, this is very common failing point, that most of the students, because they are just they feel the urge just to select a topic and just to start the process. Sometimes they pick a topic which is not good, not good because it's not important. Could be the topic could be important, but the question is, can you live with this topic for a few years? So it could be 2 years if you are masters, it could be 3 years if you're PhD, could be more than that, could be 4 or 5 years. So if you feel that this topic is, you can live with that topic, you have some kind of a little bit of passion about that topic, you, from your previous experience, from your previous studies, you feel that you are interested in this topic, and this topic is, of course, it has to be important, because if it's not important, that's a waste of your time. That's a waste of your time. Even if you enjoy some topic for 3 or 5 years, really it's a waste of time. It's a waste of your life if that topic ends up not being important and being trivial or outdated. So please select the topic carefully. That's the best. One of the measures of the topic that resonates with you is that you feel that you can spend years with this topic. If you feel like that, please go for that topic. Of course, in addition to being important and following, of course, the literature review, but I'm not talking about how to select a topic. I'm talking about what kind of topic you have to follow. And then you have to develop first, especially in the beginning, a broad set of interests. So I know, and you know, that especially in PhD studies, eventually you have to focus. You have to focus on a very narrow area in your field. Actually, it's a point. Eventually, your title that you will add, the knowledge that you will add to the body of knowledge will be in the form of a title, which is just a point. It's very narrow focus, really. But you will make good postgrad students, really, if you first develop a broad set of interests, then you narrow it down later on. And of course, it's very extremely important. You have to know the literature. I will refer to point 22, which is taken from this from the previous article, again from Nature. This is actually the Nature article. It has this point number 22 here. So I am borrowing again this point because it says this very well about knowing the literature. Read the literature in your first immediate area, which is the immediate field of interest, both the current and the past. So you have to go in history a little bit back. So don't focus only on the state of the art. That's a common problem, really. Students are very narrow-minded, so they just know what is the latest work in their field, especially PhD studies. No, you have to know from the beginning. At least you have to know the basic classics. Every field has classic works. Classic works means the works that establish that field. And then from that, you focus on the current, this is called the state of the art in the field, because everybody knows, okay, not everybody knows, but let me just say that the knowledge, we can divide the knowledge into two big parts. We have the established knowledge. You will find that in undergrad studies. This is the basics and fundamentals in the field. And you have the state of the art, cutting edge knowledge. The state of the art is the knowledge that is being now researched and being now debated and being now proven. And you will contribute to that. But you cannot contribute to that without knowing this. Because you cannot add, if you agree with me that research is about adding to the body of knowledge, can you add to something you don't know about? Doesn't make a sense. You have to know the body of knowledge so that you can add to the body of knowledge. So you can't make an original contribution, which is the requirement of a PhD and master by research, to the body of knowledge unless you know the body of knowledge. Obvious. And then don't make up problems that don't exist. That's one of the common problems in the topics when people pick up topics. Sometimes when you are really tired of finding a topic, then you just create a topic. So you create a problem that doesn't exist. Doesn't exist means it's either trivial, or it is solved, or it is not real. Not real means it really doesn't exist. So I will not focus, because if I started talking about that, this will need another talk. But just probably I want you to come up with the basic idea here. Follow the literature, follow existing real problems, and don't make up problems. Even if you couldn't find the problem immediately, it's better to spend more time than to create an artificial problem, and then you will have to change the title later on. And then be completely transparent. Transparent means every step, every process you do, everything you do, it should be clear, and it should be reported clearly, honestly, and also transparent with your supervisor. If you have some problems, if you don't know, it's most important to be clear about the things you don't know. It's not a problem that you don't know a lot of things. That's actually natural. That's actually the default. It's a problem when you want to look like you're knowing everything. So transparency means a lot of things. But one of the most important things here, that whenever you select something, whenever you do a research, admit and acknowledge the things you don't know for your supervisor, for your readers, for yourself, and then by the time you will know more. And you have to create a value. This is one of the big differences between undergrad and postgrad students. I will not really focus on that, because every point of this needs a lot of discussion. So please allow me to skip those points. And this is a very important topic. Actually, if you were in one of the top universities, you will find this natural. But most of the universities, this is not emphasized. So think big means it's when you do a research, if possible, that's not possible most of the time, but tackle the most important problems in your field. So don't look for the small details. Don't look for the very narrow interest. Everything is important. Whatever you add to the body of knowledge is important at some point, because this will be used later on. But not everything born with same importance. So not every topic is the same importance. So sometimes some problems are very narrow in scope, and some it will serve but maybe small group of people, or it will solve a small scale problem of small scale. And some problems, they are very big. It impacts a lot of people. It impacts wide range of fields. Sometimes they are breakthroughs. So if possible, you try to think big whenever you select a topic, whenever you want to add a contribution, whenever you think of a solution. Don't underestimate yourself if that's true, if that's okay. Sometimes overshooting also not very helpful, especially if you don't have enough background and enough skills, but it's useful to keep that in your mind. Okay, then process very quickly. I will go through this, because these are tips that are well understood. I think you will agree with most of it. Some of them belongs to the realm of productivity, so this will be familiar to you from other resources. So I will just put them as a reminder. So I will go through them quickly a little bit. Later on, you can refer to that. But I didn't want to skip that, because these are also important. This makes the daily, day-to-day, grinding of the research work. Actually, any work for that matter. So first, you have to work out when and where you are most effective. So if there is a specific time, a specific place you find yourself productive, please study that. and you have to know yourself better to be good, because postgrad studies, you will need a lot of time. You will need a lot of time reading, a lot of time writing. You will need good mood and good productivity, and you will need to go into the flow many times in a week. So it's better to know what time and where, what place you are performing better. And of course, again, we have said this before, you have to get organized. So you have to have a place for everything and everything in its place. And you have to create a routine. This is one of the most important productivity tips. Create a routine. You have to schedule everything important, of course, and try to stick to a routine. So means build habitual procedures. So you have to have kind of habits. So this is your habit to sit down in, for example, 8 a.m. or 9 a.m. and read for 2 hours. That's a habit. So that's a routine you are doing everywhere. So for example, your habit or your routine is actually to sit down after you read a paper and write some notes, for example. So the more routine you have, the better you are in your studies. Of course, again, you have to read and read again and read deeply. So don't just read superficially. And you have to take notes. That's actually, these are most of the skills you also probably you have used during your undergrad studies. So that's not, we will not spend a lot of time convincing you of these points. I think these are self-explanatory. And you have to keep a good lab book. That's very important also, especially if you have a lab board. So please keep a good logbook and write it up every day or every week regularly. And a very good advice, which is not very common really, is to start writing early. So don't leave the writing to the end. Means after you finish all the experimentations, after you finish everything, then you start writing. As I said in the session about writing, that was the second session again, writing, one of the best advices for writing is to start writing early. Start writing drafts in the beginning of your research. So writing will be something like guiding your research instead of just documenting the results of your research. And again, that's very important that we are repeating this for the third time. You have to learn how to write very, very well, as much as possible. And remember that it all takes time. So give yourself time. That's very important. Learn when to quit. If it is a must quit, it doesn't mean necessarily quit the study, of course. It means sometimes give up a certain idea or just stop a series of, if it is really obvious that this is a dead end, be brave enough and learn how to quit when it is time to quit. It's okay. Everybody fails. It is about recovering very fast. It's not about falling down. It's about coming up again very fast. Keep track of deadlines. Obviously, don't be a deadline focus at the same time. So although you have to keep track of deadlines, but don't be driven by deadline. So deadlines are there because you have to submit something. If you don't have something good to submit, don't submit that thing. Know your data very well. That's a very important point. It deserves its own discussion. Know your tools again. I repeat that again. Understand your results. It's obvious, but many people don't understand the result. That's why they cannot explain and interpret the results. Make your results accessible. This is actually related to day-to-day activities you will do during the studies, so I will go through them very fast. Maybe in future sessions, we can elaborate on many of them later on. So you have to make your results accessible. This means you can communicate your results to people so they understand and they are convinced. You can inject the idea and convince everybody with your results. I suggest, and many people recommend, actually, this is very common advice, although very, very few postgrad students do it. Please review papers. So check the challenge of reviewing papers. I am sure, especially if you are a PhD student, after maybe a couple of years or third years, especially after you have registered in an online database and you have submitted a paper, people will start sending to you some drafts to review. Especially in conferences, local conferences, please volunteer to review those papers. It will give you an edge and advice. This is an advice for many people. And try to give talks if that's possible, because this will enforce you to sharpen your knowledge about a specific point so you can, and it is a good practice to deliver and to communicate your ideas. And also it will build your brand. It will build your name in your field. That's the point here about the people. Please don't ignore this slide. That's very important. I have ignored it. Many people have ignored it, but it's quite important. So people matters. We have to remember people matter, and you are part again of a community. So choose who you work with carefully. That's very important. Try to select the best friends, the best colleagues, and you work with the best people as much as possible. Depends on your environment, and you have to try as much as possible to surround yourself with smart people. Again, that's not very feasible every time, but nowadays you are more lucky because nowadays you can pick up people online. So there is no these borders of the local environment you have, but there is more opportunity now to actually build a larger network. So study successful people. That's a very good advice. Read about people. So just I don't want to talk too much about that, but I used to tell anybody, especially the students who are discuss with me, colleagues, you know what I'm doing most of the time when I find a paper? Actually, I don't go for the abstract until I click on the name of the author. So if you find the Google Scholar, you find the title, first thing, most probably I will click on the author. So I get to know the good people. If this paper is good, I get to know the people who are behind this paper. I learn from them. So I follow the link to their website, to their other works, to their environment, what university they are working, what group they are working, their blog, for example, if they have a blog. That's very important. You have to study successful people, and you have to see how people, especially the good people, the best people in your field, you have to follow them up, and you have to learn from them. And then know who the big names are in your field is very important. This is part of your knowing the field, and find the traits that you admire in people, and most importantly, build a strong peer network. So you have to build your network. I am guilty of not doing that. Many people are guilty of not doing that. We are not very good at building a network, but that's very important. So build a network of people, the good people in your field, and nowadays this can cross the borders of a country, of a region, and be international in scope. Your network is vital, so you have to develop relationships. And one way of doing that is to go to conferences if you can afford that, or your institute sends people to conferences. That's less and less common nowadays, but used to be very common in just a few years ago. And don't hide yourself away. That's very important as well. Don't hide yourself away from the academic community. Show yourself. Write a blog. Give a talk. Of course, write a paper, and attend the seminars, attend the workshops, attend the talks. Many people don't do that. So you see, for example, kind of these talks are not very important maybe, but there are some important talks. Please attend those talks. Don't hide yourself away from the academic community, especially the community, the very small community of your field. So you have to introduce yourself. If you went to a conference, it's useless if you didn't introduce yourself. And then again, you have to know the community. So the last thing we'll talk about here is about the rest. So although we have said a lot of the points that entails a lot of work, I know, hard work and a lot of attention, you should spend on a lot of things, but these are the last advice tips I will give, and you have to keep that in mind, because these are part of the process. It's very, very important. So don't forget about your well-being. You have to really care about your well-being and about the self-care. So try to prevent your work from being your whole life, because it's not. This is first. Second, try always to schedule downtime. Downtime could be breaks during the day, and also week ends you have to take, and sometimes holidays. So you have to schedule that in your life. If you didn't, you will burn out. Simply put, you will burn out. We are not machines. So from time to time, you have to take some downtime, small breaks, short breaks, some weekends off, and probably some holidays in the season or in the semester or in the year. And try to prioritize self-care, eat well, sleep well, exercise. These are the most important aspects. And finally, you have to remember, it's not like a machine. You are not a machine, and this is not a factory. So you have to have a social life. If you have one, nurture that one and keep it very well. If you don't, you try to build a social life, because it's not worth to follow postgrad study if you are not happy in your life. Okay, thank people. That's all that I have to share with you today. Thank you very much for your attention and for your listening. And although this is almost around the 4 o'clock, we have just 2 minutes short of that. I really thank you for being here and for listening to me all this time. So for now, for the rest of the few minutes, maybe I open the door for any comments or any additions you have, or if you have any questions or anything you want to add some clarifications upon. So please go ahead.
Thank you, sir.
Sorry, I am not sure I could hear the voice.
Thank you. Thank you very much
Oh,
for
okay.
your time.
Welcome.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, thank you very much. So if anybody has any comments
Thank
or
you.
addition, yep.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
But please, Victor, can we get this presentation document, please?
About the slides. Yes, yes, of course. It will be available on the Facebook of the TES, and also the whole recording will be available on YouTube, the Energy Sphere YouTube. This is, let me just show you. Yeah.
I send this document, this tracks, please, Victor.
Again, I couldn't hear you really.
This I said, can you send this presentation document in this chat, please?
Okay, no problem. Actually, we used to, yeah, okay. We used to provide all these the talks after we convert these to PDFs, and we have the recordings, and we send on the Energy Sphere Facebook and YouTube. But I will send it also on this channel. Okay. Is there any question or addition? Really, thank you very much for being here. I will. If you just stick around for a little bit after we finish, I will send this through the chat, okay? Okay, if there is nothing else, I really thank you very much, and I hope that we will see you next month with another session, maybe our sixth session on this. Please, if you have any, if you are not part of this team, actually, we have a team on this Microsoft Teams, specific teams for this series, coffee hour series. So probably you can join, or you can share with us any not only feedback. We are welcoming also suggestions for ideas for future talks. So if you have something in mind you want to share, or you want to have discussed, probably we will be very glad actually to receive those suggestions. And I will just let me just spend some time. If you stick around for a couple of minutes, I will share the slides. Let me just prepare the slide. Maybe yes, okay. But again, you will find these slides on the same channels you have found the advertisement. Yeah, these are the slides. So just move it. I'm now uploading actually the slides. You should find it now on the chat. Is it okay? Could you find it?
Please, Victor, how can I get the channel, the link for your channel, please, Victor?
Again, Ali. Sorry, what you said? Sorry, I couldn't hear you very clearly.
How can I get the link for your channel?
Could you find? Oh, okay. Uh, I think we will have help from. Okay, Razin, I think we can send to these names who attended. We can update them with the link, isn't it? So let me check the teams. Maybe how did you get the link to this talk? We'll try to use the same channel to send again the link for the teams, just to be notified whenever we have talks, because we have regular sessions. Actually, two types of series we have until there. We have another series which is more technical, really. So talking about technical talks, mostly about IT, computer engineering topics. So we have talked about, for example, machine learning, IoT, programming, this kind of stuff. So if you are interested in those technical topics, probably also is better to have to be notified every time. So we will try to send the link to the same group of people we have here, to your emails, or the same channels you have received the ad for this talk. Okay, so yeah, we'll try
Sorry,
to
doctor, but there is nothing in the chat box. I didn't get the slides. Even I
Isn't
couldn't
there a file?
write.
Okay, I think I have sent a file called Coffee
Where?
Hours on the chat here on the Teams now.
On the chat box, there is nothing. Even I couldn't write anything in it.
Anyone else can try?
Yes, sir.
Razin, can you see the file, or is there any problem?
Okay, Feroz, can you send it to me later?
Yeah, of course. We will send it again. I will. You will find it in on
Where?
this. Okay, let me just. You can refer also to previous talks. I will give you both the. Just give me one moment. This is Facebook, and also YouTube. Maybe you can find something. Okay, this is the Facebook page. This is now I'm putting that on the chat. And also you can find here the previous talks, some of them at least, on the YouTube channel of the Energy Sphere. Could you find that on the chat?
No, doctor, the chat box is empty. I don't know why.
Anybody else? Razin, can you confirm that? Could you find anything on the chat? Or Zahir?
Yes, I cannot.
Okay.
I cannot find anything.
Yeah, there is nothing
Doctor,
in
please.
the chat box.
Okay, so very
In the
strange. So let me see.
presentation
It's very strange actually.
for the video. Can you try, Doctor?
Okay.
Only
Okay,
the
it's
presentation.
okay. I actually I can see even the messages you're. Razin, is there anything on the chat or not? Maybe because they are outside. Are we because we are?
Nothing. That is empty, Doctor.
Yeah, even we couldn't write anything.
Okay, probably maybe that depends on. Okay, let me see the reply from my colleagues. They said the chat. Okay, maybe because meeting. It's very strange. Actually, let me really I don't know why, because I can see the message of my colleagues. He says nothing at the chat, although I can see his messages and my messages at the same place. This is very strange. Anyway, no problem. We will try to communicate with you later on. We don't want to, waste your time for now, but we will try to communicate with you. Let's say for starter, if you can, you can write anything at all on the chat. So, for example, you can write your email, for example, to just contact you later on with the slides. Can't you write anything on?
We can't
hello,
write anything
hello.
in the chat.
Hello.
Yes, Razin. Yes.
Hello.
Yeah, Razin, we can hear you. Yes.
Yes, Doctor, sorry, just now I have some mic problem. So the question is about what actually? Regarding what?
About the chat, they cannot write to the chat. Can you see my messages on the chat?
Yes, I can see.
So why can't they see this?
Also, Victor, I cannot write anything.
I can't do also.
Okay, let me share the screen just to tell. Okay, let me share my screen again, just to show you what I'm seeing, so that can you see now my screen? Okay,
Yes,
let me.
yes.
Okay,
And
can you
the
see
chat,
this? Okay,
cannot write anything.
now can you see the Teams meeting?
Yes.
You see, I am clicking on this show conversation, and I see this chat. So I see Razin's messages, and these are the messages I sent before. So I am clicking here on this conversation, this button. So do you see the same interface or something else? So for the people, if I want to show the participants, I click on this button here.
You didn't see your things.
Oh, you don't see this.
Yes, Doctor, we can't see the chat.
Okay, so that's what I meant when I say I mean that I am seeing the chat. I'm not sure why, but maybe let me see. I don't see anything special here, so let me stop the recording anyway. No need